He had everything: money, power, and a mansion too big for one man. She had nothing but silence, struggle, and a secret she never meant for him to see. But one night, everything changed. Suspicious, he decided to follow his maid after work, and what he discovered, it changed both of their lives forever. Sit back, relax, and watch this unforgettable story unfold. Because sometimes, the richest hearts are found in the most unexpected places. It was almost 6 p.m. The golden Lagos sun was starting to set behind the tall buildings in Lekki. A cool breeze swept through the compound of Desmond Ume's mansion, but the air inside Desmond felt anything but calm. From his upstairs window he spotted his maid, Doris, rushing down the front steps with 2 nylon bags in her hands. She didn't see him watching. "Doris, wait!" he called out from the balcony, his voice firm but curious. She froze for a second, then turned. Her eyes widened slightly in surprise. "Yes, sir." "Did I forget something?" she asked, adjusting the bags nervously. Desmond stepped out of the house, his face calm but his mind racing. He looked at the bags. They didn't seem heavy, but they were full. "What's inside those?" he asked quietly, keeping his eyes on her face. Doris gave a small, unsure smile. "Just some things I picked up at lunchtime. Groceries." He didn't answer immediately. He studied her. Something didn't feel right. "You've been leaving early a lot lately," he said. "Always saying it's your mother, that she's sick." Doris nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I told you before, she's not been well. I'm trying my best." Desmond stepped a little closer. "I heard you on the phone yesterday. You were speaking in Igbo. You mentioned needing urgent money." He paused. "Are you hiding something, Doris?" Her eyes blinked fast, her fingers tightening on the nylon bags. I don't understand what you mean." "I'm not asking," Desmond said, his tone slightly sharper now. "I'm telling you, something's going on." The space between them felt heavy. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Doris looked down, then slowly lifted her chin. "Sir, if you don't trust me, maybe you should find someone else to clean your house." And just like that, she turned and walked out the gate. Her sandals made soft sounds on the pavement as she disappeared down the street. Desmond stood still, his hands in his pockets, jaw tight. Back inside his massive house, the silence felt louder than usual. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, but it didn't calm him. He stared out of the large window overlooking the busy roads of Victoria Island. His mind was running. He had always been careful, after years of betrayal and fake friendships. To him, money brought more enemies than peace. And now, even Doris, the soft-spoken girl who cleaned his kitchen and watered his plants, she too might be hiding something. He didn't like mysteries. He needed to know the truth. The night felt too quiet, and Desmond couldn't sleep. The mansion was dark except for the soft glow of Desmond's laptop screen. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock and the occasional car honk in the distance. Desmond sat at his desk, staring at Doris's employee file on the screen. Her details were all there. Doris Eza, 27 years old, grew up in Enugu, started working for him 8 months ago, references checked, ID verified. But something still didn't sit right. Her evening routines? Empty. He had never paid attention before, but now that he looked closely, there were gaps, unexplained early departures, weekend absences, and no mention of what she did after work. "Too clean," he whispered. "Too simple." He leaned back in his chair. A part of him felt guilty. Doris had always been polite, always quiet. She did her work without complaining. But another part of him, the part that had been lied to before, couldn't let it go. He remembered something. Earlier that week, when it rained, Doris had come in soaked. She took off her coat and hung it on the rack in the hallway. Desmond had walked by and, without thinking, offered to move the coat to dry. When he reached into the pocket, he felt a small folded receipt. Desmond got up from his desk, walked to the coat rack near the kitchen, and reached into the same pocket. It was still there. A crumpled bank slip. He unfolded it slowly, squinting at the ink. 200,000 transferred to an account in Enugu. The name on the account was Iyoma Eze. His chest tightened. Her mother? Was she telling the truth after all? Or was this something else? He placed the slip on the table and took a deep breath. Tomorrow, he would ask her. But part of him already knew she wouldn't answer him directly. Doris was good at keeping things to herself. Quiet people often were. And the more Desmond tried to understand her, the more confused he felt. She was just a maid. But why did it feel like there was so much more to her story? It was Friday evening. Doris had just finished mopping the dining room floor when she turned to Desmond and said quietly, "Sir, I'll be leaving now. My mother has a hospital checkup early tomorrow. I also have some things to handle tonight." Desmond nodded, keeping his face neutral. "All right, take care." But the moment she stepped out, he picked up his car keys. Something inside him just wouldn't rest. Too many questions, too many gaps. He had given her the evening off, yet she still had things to handle. What kind of things? Where was she really going? 15 minutes later. Desmond sat quietly in a black SUV, parked just down the road from his own house. He had lowered the seat slightly so she wouldn't notice him. Doris walked quickly, carrying a small bag. Her steps were steady, like someone with a purpose. She didn't take a cab. She didn't call a ride. Instead, she boarded a yellow Danfo bus heading toward Ajegunle. Desmond's eyes narrowed. Ajegunle? That's far from here. He started the engine and followed the bus from a distance, careful not to get too close. The traffic lights felt endless. The air was thick with Lagos tension smoke from roadside suya grills, the shouts of hawkers, the heat of the crowd. But Desmond barely noticed. His focus was only on the bus and the girl sitting by the window, staring out at nothing. Over an hour later, the bus stopped in a crowded street with narrow roads and faded shop signs. Doris got down and walked past a row of buildings. One of them had peeling paint and a small sign above the door. Desmond squinted. The sign said, Umu Ne Learning Center Evening Classes Food Support. He parked on the other side of the road and waited. From where he sat, he could see inside through the glass windows. The place was small, worn down, but alive. And then he saw her. What he didn't expect. Doris was standing at the front of a small classroom. She smiled gently as she spoke to a group of older women and men, some with notebooks, some just listening. She wasn't cleaning. She wasn't hiding. She was teaching. English. Simple phrases. "How are you?" she said slowly, pointing to the chalkboard. The students repeated after her, their accents thick but eager. Doris walked around the room, helping them. She even laughed, that soft, quiet laugh Desmond had never heard in his house. When an elderly man struggled with the word hospital, she knelt beside him and gently corrected him. Desmond watched, and something inside him shifted. This wasn't a secret life. This was a sacrifice. This was a woman who left his mansion at sunset, not to rest, not to play, but to give knowledge, hope, and kindness to people who had almost nothing. And suddenly, he felt ashamed of every suspicion he had. Desmond sat in his study that night, staring at his laptop screen. He couldn't sleep. He had watched Doris teach those people with patience, with love, like it was the most natural thing in the world, and yet he had never seen that side of her before. Back in his house, she was quiet, careful, almost invisible. But there, at the learning center, she was alive. Who is she, really? Desmond thought. And why have I never bothered to ask? He began to dig. He typed in the name he had seen on the old building's sign. A basic website came up, very simple, poor design. There was a donation link, a few blurry photos, and a small About Us page. Desmond clicked. It read, "We offer free evening English classes to low-income adults and new arrivals from rural areas. Many of our learners were farmers, traders, or artisans who never finished school. We believe in second chances." There were pictures, in almost every one of them. Doris was there. Teaching, smiling, hugging students, unpacking food. In one photo, she was handing out bread and bottled water. Another showed her reading a children's book to a group of adults, helping them sound out the words slowly. And then he saw it. We run entirely on small donations and personal funds. Currently, we are behind on rent. Volunteers provide food and teaching materials with their own money. Desmond leaned back in his chair. So that's what the shopping bags were. The food wasn't for herself. It was for her students. He felt a sting in his chest. She had never once asked him for help. She had been going out there every night after cleaning his 5-bedroom mansion to serve people who had nothing. And he had suspected her of stealing. Desmond picked up his phone and called David, his longtime assistant and closest friend. Do a full search on the Umuni Learning Center, Desmond said softly. I want to know how much they owe, what their running costs are, and how many people they serve weekly. David sounded surprised. Boss, you okay? Desmond's voice was quiet. No, but I want to be. The next morning, David sent him the report. The center was barely surviving. Rent overdue by 2 months, classes happening in borrowed spaces, roof leaking in 2 places, no steady sponsor. Doris was listed as a lead volunteer not paid, and most shocking of all, she worked 3 jobs. His maid, 5 days a week, a weekend cashier at a small supermarket, evening teacher and volunteer at the center unpaid. Desmond stared at the screen. He thought about his house, full of luxury and silence, and her world, full of people, needs, struggle, and yet so much joy. He had misjudged her completely. Doris Eze wasn't a liar. She was something much rarer, a giver. The next morning was cool and quiet. A soft breeze drifted through the open kitchen window. Doris was already up as always, quietly wiping the kitchen counters and folding dish towels with care. She didn't expect to see Desmond. He almost never came downstairs this early. But today he walked into the kitchen holding his coffee mug, wearing a loose shirt and a thoughtful face. Good morning, Doris, he said softly. Doris turned around quickly, surprised. Good morning, sir. I was just finishing here. I'll get out of your way. Desmond didn't move. Actually, could you sit for a moment? I'd like to talk to you. She paused, then nodded slowly and wiped her hands on her apron. She sat on the edge of the dining chair, unsure what this was about. Desmond sat across from her, took a slow sip of his coffee, then looked her in the eye. I know about the Umuni Learning Center. Doris froze. For a moment her breath caught in her throat. Sir, don't know what you mean. I followed you, Desmond said quietly, the other night, when you said you were working late. He looked down, a little ashamed. I didn't trust you. I thought maybe you were hiding something, and I was right, but not in the way I expected. Doris's eyes began to water. You followed me? Desmond nodded. I saw you teaching, helping those people, carrying food, speaking kindly, smiling. I've never seen you smile like that here. Doris looked down at her lap, her fingers trembling. I wasn't trying to hide it. I just didn't think it mattered. It matters, Desmond said. Silence settled between them for a moment, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Desmond leaned forward. I read about the center. I saw the photos. I know you work there every evening. I know you also clean houses downtown and do weekend shifts at a grocery store. All of that, just to keep that center alive. Doris wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I couldn't just leave them, she said quietly. Most of them never had a chance to learn. They were farmers, builders, tailors. But they're proud. They want to learn English so they can work, or speak to doctors, or just feel like they belong. Desmond said nothing. He just listened. Doris continued, her voice cracking. That center is all they have. Sometimes I use my little salary here to buy bread and fruit to feed them. I don't have much, but I can't walk away. Desmond's heart tightened. He had spent years building walls, thinking no one could be trusted, that everyone had a secret agenda. But this girl, this quiet, humble girl who swept his floors and watered his plants, she had a heart he didn't know existed in this world anymore. Doris, he said softly, You've given more than most people who have 10 times your salary." She looked up, startled. "Sir?" Desmond offered a faint smile. "I just wanted you to know. I see you now." 3 days later, Doris walked into the small, worn building of the Umutne Learning Center, the same one with faded paint and a rusted gate. She had barely set down her bags when Madame Ayo, the elderly coordinator of the center, rushed in with trembling hands. "Doris, Doris, come and see," she called out breathlessly. Doris wiped her forehead and came running. "What's wrong, Mama Ayo?" Ayo was holding a printed bank statement in one hand and waving it in the air like a flag. "5 million, she shouted. 5 million, child. An anonymous donation came in this morning. Can you believe it?" Doris froze. 5 million? She whispered, eyes wide. "Yes. It came through the foundation's bank account around 8 a.m. There was no name, no message. Just, 'We believe in your mission.' That's all." Doris put a hand over her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. For a few seconds the world stood still. Then she laughed. Not a loud laugh. A laugh full of relief, wonder, disbelief. "God, oh God, you heard me," she said softly. "You really heard me." That evening, the center buzzed with joy. Plans to fix the leaking roof, new textbooks for the adult literacy class, a working desktop computer lab finally, extra food for evening meals, enough money to pay small stipends to volunteer teachers. Doris could barely stop smiling. She stood at the front of the class that night, helping an old man named Baba Chika read a sentence about going to the doctor. She read aloud. "I feel pain in my back." "Say it with me," she told him gently. As Baba repeated the words, slowly and proudly, Doris felt something rise in her chest. Hope. Real hope. Across the street, Desmond sat in his parked SUV across the road, hidden behind tinted windows. He could see her clearly through the window, the way she smiled at her students, the way she encouraged them patiently, the way her whole body moved with purpose and joy. He didn't need her to know it was him. He didn't need a thank you. Seeing her like this, happy, alive, full of light, was enough. He had sent the 5 million early that morning, quietly, anonymously, no strings attached. And now, watching her from the shadows, Desmond felt something warm settle in his chest, the same warmth he used to think money would give him. But it never had. It started with little things. Desmond began spending more time at home, not because of meetings or calls or stress, but because he found himself wanting to be around. Around her. Around Doris, the woman he once barely noticed beyond her chores. He found excuses to go into the kitchen when she was there. He timed his coffee breaks to match when she brought in fresh flowers for the dining table. Sometimes, he would just sit at the kitchen island and watch her move, quiet, focused, graceful. And more they talked. Not just about cleaning or groceries or keys misplaced, but about life. One Tuesday afternoon, Desmond walked into the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea. "Here," he said, offering one to Doris. "It's ginger. I thought you might like it." She blinked, surprised. "Thank you, sir." He smiled. "Please, call me Desmond." She hesitated. "Okay, Desmond." They both chuckled softly at the awkwardness. They sat in silence for a moment, sipping tea. Then Desmond spoke. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone here?" Doris turned, curious. "Of course." "My parents died when I was 22. Car accident late at night, coming back from a business trip." Her eyes softened. "I'm so sorry." He nodded slowly. "They left me everything, money, property, staff, but I lost more than I gained. I've spent years building walls around myself. I guess I didn't want to lose anyone again." He looked down at his tea. "I thought if I just stayed alone, I'd be safe." Doris spoke quietly. "Sometimes we think shutting people out will protect us, but the silence, it just gets louder." He looked at her then, really looked. "You understand that?" She gave a small, sad smile. "At the center, we're all like that. people who've lost their homes, their families, and their language. But we created something together. We became each other's family. Desmond leaned back. Chosen family. Yes, she said softly. Sometimes the people who love you most aren't the ones you were born to. They're the ones who stay when you have nothing. That night, Desmond sat in his study with the lights off, thinking about Doris's words. He thought about the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about the center. He thought about how she had given strangers her time, her energy, her love without ever expecting anything back. He had never met anyone like her. And now, without even trying, she had started to heal something inside him. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. The house was still quiet, wrapped in that gentle stillness before the Lagos noise came alive, car horns, street hawkers, and impatient bus conductors. Desmond rubbed his eyes as he walked into the kitchen, hoping to make himself a cup of tea. But someone was already there. At the small table by the window sat Doris, still in her wrapper, surrounded by books, loose papers, and a half-empty biro. A small, rechargeable lamp glowed softly on the table. She didn't notice him at first. She was writing intensely, lips moving slightly as she read from a handwritten page. Desmond cleared his throat gently. Doris looked up, startled. "Oh, good morning, sir. Sorry, I didn't hear you." He stepped closer, curious. "What are you working on?" She tried to gather her papers quickly. "It's nothing important, just something I'm trying to finish." Desmond smiled, not unkindly. "Doris, you're writing a research paper at 5:30 in the morning. That doesn't look like nothing." She hesitated, then sighed and gently set her pen down. "I'm writing my final thesis," she said. "For school." Desmond blinked. "School? I didn't know you were studying." "I attend evening classes at the community center after volunteering," she said quietly. "I'm trying to earn my diploma from Lagos City College." He sat down across from her. "What's your thesis about?" Doris hesitated again, her fingers brushing over the cover page. Then she pushed it toward him. Desmond read the title aloud. "Invisible Brilliance: Why Skilled Nigerians from Rural Areas Are Forced into Survival Jobs in the City." He looked up surprised. "This is impressive." Doris gave a shy smile. "It's something I've seen too many times. People who are engineers, bakers, tailors in their hometowns, when they move to the city, no one respects their skills anymore. They don't speak enough English, so they end up sweeping floors or selling on the roadside." Desmond nodded slowly. "I've seen that happen too." Doris continued, her voice steady now. "My friend Mama Chi was a trained midwife in Owerri. But here in Lagos, she cleans offices. Another man I know, Uncle Bala, used to fix generators and radios back in Kogi. Here, he pushes a wheelbarrow in the market." Her eyes darkened a little. "It's not that they're lazy. They're talented, brave, hard-working. But the system doesn't see them." Desmond looked at her, deeply moved. The way she spoke, calm, clear, passionate, it was like a fire had been quietly burning inside her all this time. "You've really thought this through," he said. Doris looked down. "It's personal. Most people think I'm just a maid. But I want to build something better. I want to start programs that help people get their dignity back. Not from scratch, but by building on what they already know." Desmond was silent for a long moment. Then he said softly, "Doris, you're not just helping people. You're trying to change an entire system." She gave a small, hopeful smile. "I have to try." That morning, as Desmond returned to his room, the echo of her words stayed with him. Invisible brilliance. That's what she had called it. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had just met someone truly extraordinary. The day after their early morning conversation, Doris continued her usual routine, sweeping the sitting room, dusting bookshelves, preparing breakfast. But something felt different. There was a quiet awareness between her and Desmond now, a softness in his tone, a kindness in his eyes. She noticed it in the way he paused before leaving the room, the way he asked questions and waited for her full answers. That afternoon, while she arranged fresh flowers in the dining room, Desmond walked in with something in his hand. A file, neatly labeled. He stood beside the table and gently placed it in front of her. "Doris, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about your thesis, your ideas." She looked up, confused. "Sir?" Desmond smiled. "I run a foundation. You probably didn't know. It's small, but we focus on education, youth development, and supporting underrepresented communities." She nodded slowly. "I want to expand it. I want to do more, and I want you to help lead it." He slid the file toward her. "I'm offering you the role of Community Outreach Director. It's full-time. It comes with a proper salary, enough to help your mother, pay for your final year, and still support the center if you want." Doris's hands trembled as she touched the file. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said softly. "You've earned it." But Doris didn't answer right away. She sat down slowly, her thoughts spinning, her heart heavy with emotions. She had cleaned this house for months. She had taught English under leaking roofs. And now she was being offered a job, not as a cleaner, not as a volunteer, but as a leader. "Desmond," she whispered, "I'm grateful. I really am, but..." She looked down at her hands. "Part of me is afraid of leaving what I know, afraid of feeling like I've abandoned the very people I'm trying to help." He nodded gently. "Because if you step away from the day-to-day, you're no longer there on the front lines. I get that. It's not just that," she said, her voice tight. "The people at the center, they're like family. We built something together. Taking this job feels like I'm choosing money over purpose." Desmond leaned forward. "It's not one or the other. It's both. With this role, you'd be helping even more people, Doris. Creating real programs, long-term impact. You'd still be you, just with more tools to work with." She bit her lip. Her mind was torn in two. One side whispered, "This is what you've worked for." The other side said, "Don't forget where you come from." She looked up, eyes filled with uncertainty. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," Desmond said. "Take your time." But deep down he could already see it, the battle in her heart. He respected it, because it meant she wasn't doing this for herself. She never had. Days passed. Doris didn't say yes. She didn't say no either. But everything between her and Desmond began to shift. Where there had once been warm tea, shared laughter, and long conversations, now there was polite distance. "Good morning, sir." "Good morning, Doris." That was it. She no longer paused to ask him how his day was. He no longer lingered by the kitchen door. They passed each other like shadows in a wide, beautiful house, full of space, but now empty of warmth. Desmond felt it in his bones. He had opened a door to her, and maybe she had been too afraid to walk through it. Or maybe he had asked too much. One Friday afternoon, Doris knocked gently on the door of Desmond's study. He looked up from his laptop, heart sinking. She stood there with an envelope in her hand. "I just came to say, I'm giving my notice." His throat went dry. 2 weeks. He swallowed hard. "You're leaving?" She nodded. "Yes, sir, I want to try something new and give the center more of my time." Desmond nodded slowly. "Okay." There was a long pause. Neither of them moved. Then Doris added, almost in a whisper, "Thank you for everything, for believing in me, for seeing me." He looked at her then, really looked, and saw the sadness in her eyes. "Doris," he said softly, "whatever you do next, I know you'll change lives." She gave a tight smile. "That means more than you know." The next 2 weeks were torture. Desmond, who had spent years surrounded by people he didn't trust, now found himself missing someone who was still in the same house. He memorized the way she moved around the living room, the way she hummed to herself while watering the plants, the way she tied her hair up in a scarf when she was cleaning. He wanted to stop her, to tell her she didn't have to go,
but he stayed quiet, because he didn't want to stand in her way. One evening, he knocked gently on her door and handed her a manila envelope. Inside were recommendation letters, glowing, heartfelt, personal. She looked at him surprised. "These are beautifully written." He smiled faintly. "They're true." She stared down at the papers, heart full.
"I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep in touch." "I will." They stood in silence again. Two people on opposite sides of a goodbye. It had been 3 months since Doris left. Desmond kept himself busy with work, board meetings, new investments. But the house felt colder without her presence. He still caught himself listening for her footsteps in the hallway. Still reached for a second mug of tea before remembering she no longer sat across from him in the mornings. He told himself it was just routine. But it wasn't. It was absence. It was regret. One Thursday morning, Desmond sat at his office desk sorting through a pile of unopened letters when his assistant, David, walked in. "Sir, this came for you personally. It looks different." He handed over a gold-embossed envelope, sealed with a deep blue wax stamp. Desmond raised an eyebrow. "You are cordially invited to the Umu Anne Community Center's annual fundraising gala award ceremony." He kept reading, but his breath caught when he reached the next part. "Honoring Miss Doris Eze, Volunteer of the Year, Advocate for Community Education and Inclusion." His hands trembled slightly as he lowered the card. David noticed the look on his face. "Should I RSVP now?" Desmond stared at the invitation for a long moment. "No," he said softly. "Tell them. I'll be there." Gala night, weeks later. The community center had been transformed. String lights hung from the ceilings. Round tables were covered in white cloths and decorated with paper flowers handmade by students. Laughter and warm greetings filled the air in many languages: Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, even Pidgin. Doris moved gracefully between guests, checking on final details. She had never looked so confident or so free. When the room began to fill, one of the elderly women called out to her, "Doris, look who just walked in." She turned toward the door, and there he was, Desmond, dressed in a dark grey suit, standing quietly, a bit unsure, his eyes scanning the room until they locked with hers. Her breath caught. She hadn't seen him in months. Later. That evening, the MC called her name. Everyone clapped as Doris walked to the stage to receive her award. The lights were warm on her skin. Her smile was steady, but her heart was racing. As she held the plaque, she spoke into the mic. "Thank you all. I never thought a simple act of service would lead me here. I used to believe that no one saw me, but now I see all of you. This isn't just my award, it's ours." The crowd cheered. Desmond clapped, his heart full of quiet pride. In that moment, he realized something. He didn't come just to see her succeed. He came because he missed her. Because no business deal, no boardroom, no bank account ever filled him the way her presence did. And tonight, seeing her shine, he felt the weight of everything he never said. The gala had begun to slow down. Children curled up on chairs, elders leaned back in contentment, and laughter filled the warm air like music. Doris stood near the entrance, holding her crystal plaque. Her heart was still full, but her mind kept drifting to the man in the grey suit near the back of the room. Desmond. He hadn't approached her yet, just stood watching. Until now. She turned, and there he was. "Congratulations," he said quietly. "You deserve every bit of that award." She smiled, but there was a tremble in her lips. "Thank you for coming." They stood in silence for a beat too long. Then Doris took a slow breath and said, "There's something I've been wanting to say, even though I didn't know who to say it to." Desmond tilted his head. "What is it?" She held the plaque tighter. "My mother. She's well now, completely healthy. She had surgery 3 months ago." Desmond's eyes softened. Doris continued, voice lowering.
We were stuck for so long no hospital would take her without full payment. And just when I thought I'd have to give up. She looked at him, a tear beginning to form. Someone paid the bill, completely, an anonymous donor. Desmond looked down, hands in his pockets. That same week, she added, the Learning Center received its biggest donation ever, also anonymous. Her voice broke a little. I don't know who did it,
But if I could ever meet them, I'd tell them they saved my life. There was silence. Heavy. Honest. Desmond looked up slowly, and for the first time in months, the walls around his voice finally cracked. Doris. It was me. She blinked. What? He stepped closer. I followed you that night when you left early. I thought you were stealing from me. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I saw you get off the bus. I saw the center. I saw you teaching, feeding people, smiling like I'd never seen you smile before. His voice shook, and I realized in that moment I was wrong, so wrong, about everything. Tears welled up in her eyes. I made the donation, for your mother's surgery, for the center, because watching you that night, seeing the way you live, how much you give, it changed me. She stared at him, the truth settling in piece by piece. You did all that? Without telling me? I didn't want credit, he said softly. I just wanted to help. I wanted to feel like for once I was doing something that mattered. And why tell me now? Desmond's voice dropped. Because I couldn't keep standing in the back of the room pretending I don't care. Because I do, Doris. I care so much it scares me. Her hands trembled. I didn't ask for charity, Desmond. It wasn't charity, he whispered. It was love. Silence fell again, but it was different this time. Not heavy, just full. Of feeling, of truth, of two hearts finally laid bare. Doris stood there, clutching her award as Desmond's words hung in the air. It wasn't charity, it was love. But she didn't smile. She looked down, shook her head slowly. I don't know how to feel, she whispered. Desmond's face fell. Doris, you paid my mother's hospital bill, funded the center, gave me a job offer, and I didn't even know. I thought I was building something on my own with my own two hands. You were, he said firmly. Everything you've built is yours. She looked up, eyes wet now. Then why does it feel like I've just found out someone was holding the ladder the whole time? He stepped closer, his voice soft and steady. Because I saw you climbing, alone, and I couldn't just watch anymore. Doris bit her lip. Her voice trembled. I've spent most of my life being rescued or used by people who only stepped in when it served them. So forgive me if I don't know how to accept help that isn't a trap. Desmond's eyes darkened with emotion. I'm not here to control you, or to take credit. I did what I did, because you changed me. She blinked, confused. What? I was a man who trusted no one. Not after what life took from me. Not after watching people turn kindness into weakness. He took a breath. But you helped people with nothing to gain. You gave your time, your energy, your food, your heart, to people who didn't have a voice, and you never asked for anything back. His voice cracked. You made me realize how empty my world was, how full it could be. That's not pity, Doris. That's admiration. That's love. Doris stood frozen, unsure of what to do with so many words, so much truth. She looked at him, searching his eyes for something false, but found only honesty. Only ache. Only love. A long pause. She turned away for a moment, hugging the award to her chest. I was afraid, she said quietly, that if I let you help me, I'd lose the part of myself I worked so hard to protect. He stepped forward slowly. And now? She turned around, her voice barely above a whisper. Now I'm afraid of what happens if I don't let you in. For the first time since that night he followed her bus, Desmond smiled, a real, open, hopeful smile. Then let's figure it out. Together. And as the music from the gala played softly in the background, two people who had once lived on opposite sides of the world Money and survival, silence and service stood face to face. And the space between them was finally closing. The lights outside the community center glowed like soft stars under the Lagos sky. Desmond and Doris stood near the back entrance, just out of view, surrounded by the quiet hum of the night. She still held her plaque. He still held her gaze. And for the first time in a long, long time, neither of them were pretending anymore. Desmond took a step closer. "Doris," he said slowly, "I didn't come here tonight just to say congratulations." She raised her eyes. "I came because I couldn't keep pretending this was something casual, that what I feel is something I can hide." She said nothing, but her heart was pounding. "I don't want to just date you," he continued. "I don't want dinner and movie conversations and see you next weekend kind of love." His voice softened. "I want to build something, a life, a mission, a partnership, you and me, helping people, lifting others, building a world where no one has to fight alone like you did." He took her hand. "I want to be your partner in purpose, your partner in everything." Tears welled up in her eyes, and her breath caught. Desmond smiled gently, hopeful. "What do you say?" Doris didn't answer right away. She leaned in, slowly, naturally, and pressed her lips softly to his. It was sweet, quiet, real. When she pulled back, her eyes were shining. "I say yes," she whispered. He exhaled like he hadn't breathed in years. "But first," she added, wiping a tear from her cheek, "you have to come meet someone." Desmond tilted his head. "Who?" She grinned. "My mother, in Enugu." He laughed, surprised. "Should I be nervous?" "Very," she said, playful now. "She has opinions and questions." Desmond took her hand again and nodded. "Then let's go to Enugu." And just like that, under the faded bulbs of a humble center that had once been on the brink of closing, two lives came together. Not through money, not through pity, but through love and purpose and the courage to start again. 3 months had passed since that quiet night outside the gala. Desmond kept his word. He traveled to Enugu, sat in a small living room filled with colorful wrappers, plastic chairs, and curious aunties, and answered every one of Mama Isa's questions. He ate pounded yam too slowly. He said "N" when he should have said "Yes, Ma." He called her Mama and meant it. By the end of the weekend, Mama Isa smiled and said, "He's too skinny, but his heart is full. That's enough." Now the wedding day had arrived, and it was happening in the place where everything began, the learning center, but it didn't look the same. The broken walls had been painted soft white. Colorful murals of alphabets, books, and smiling faces covered the side walls, all painted by the students themselves. There was now a digital lab with 10 computers, a new classroom, fresh ceiling fans, and children ran around laughing, holding paper flowers and ribbons in their hands. Under strings of fairy lights, between rows of folding chairs draped in fabric, Doris stood at the back of the hall in a dress passed down from her grandmother, simple lace, soft yellow, fitted perfectly to her small frame. Her mother adjusted her veil with shaky fingers, eyes shining. Doris smiled, touched her hand and said softly, "Thank you for not giving up on me, Mama." The guests. They came from everywhere. Tech executives from Desmond's firm, looking slightly out of place but smiling warmly. Market women who had learned to read from Doris. Elderly students who walked slowly but dressed in their finest. Little kids with hand-drawn congratulations signs taped to their shirts. Even Mama Chi, who sold a kara near the bus stop, brought a cooler of drinks. Everyone who had ever known their struggle or felt their kindness was there. There were no flashy flower arches, no chandeliers, no wedding planner, just a wooden platform decorated with baby's breath and white fabric and a borrowed keyboard playing soft gospel tunes. Desmond stood at the front in a crisp black suit, smiling so hard his cheeks hurt. When Doris walked down the makeshift aisle, everyone stood. Some cried, some clapped. Desmond forgot to breathe. When she reached him, They both laughed through tears. The officiating pastor kept it short. The vows were their own words. Doris's vow. I once thought I had to carry everything alone, but you reminded me that love is not a weight, it's a hand to help carry it. I don't just marry you, Desmond. I build with you. I believe with you. Desmond's vow. You showed me that wealth is not in bank accounts, but in the lives we lived. I promise to be your teammate, your protector, your partner in purpose. Always. When the crowd shouted, "You may kiss your bride," it felt like the whole center, the place they once saved together, had been reborn. And in the middle of it all, Mama Eza stood with her hands clasped and her eyes full of peace. Her daughter had made it. A year had passed since that wedding under string lights and sky. But Desmond and Doris hadn't slowed down. They had simply shifted their love into action. Together they launched the Ezi Okafor Foundation, named after their families, a blend of roots and new beginnings. Their mission: literacy, social services, and full support for the underserved across West Africa. Desmond handled logistics, strategy, funding, and partnerships. Doris, she led everything else. She trained volunteer teachers. She spoke in rural communities. She sat with grandmothers in overcrowded clinics, listened to market women in dusty town squares, and always ended with the words, "You are seen, you are needed, your voice matters." Their headquarters sat on the edge of Lagos, a modest, welcoming two-story space filled with books, computers, and laughter. But the heart of the foundation still lived inside the small community center where it all began. And today Desmond brought Doris back there hand in hand, just the two of them. The paint on the walls was fresh now, the windows opened wide. The children were in class, guided by new teachers Doris had trained herself. At the back of the center was a quiet room, the one where Desmond had once followed her in the shadows, thinking she was hiding something. He pushed the door open for her. She stepped inside. And there, mounted above the whiteboard, was a small gold plaque. The Amara Eza Learning Room, where every voice matters. Doris stood frozen for a moment, then ran her fingers across the letters. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "You do," Desmond said softly. "You always did." A long silence passed, warm, peaceful. Then Doris turned to him, smiling with quiet tears in her eyes. "My only regret? That I didn't tell you sooner how much I loved you." Desmond stepped closer and kissed her forehead. "I knew," he whispered. "I felt it, long before you ever said it." That evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in soft gold and pink, Desmond and Doris stood by the car packed with bags and passports. Their honeymoon awaited Zanzibar, a place neither had ever been, but both had always dreamed of. Before they got in, Doris looked back at the building. The center, the plaque, the place where it all began. "Ready for the next chapter?" Desmond asked. She took his hand, smiled deeply, and replied, "Born ready." They got in, closed the doors, and drove away. Toward love, toward purpose, toward forever. Before we close this beautiful journey for good, let one final truth echo from these pages. Let love lead. This is more than a story about a billionaire and a maid. It's a story about how love, quiet, patient, honest love, can soften the hardest hearts, can rebuild trust after betrayal, can turn pain into purpose. No matter your past, your status, or your scars, you are worthy of being seen, heard, and loved. So if this story moved you even just a little, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Subscribe so you don't miss the next powerful tale. And remember, love can overcome even the thickest walls if we dare to let it in. Until the next story, keep believing, keep building, keep loving.